Hello and welcome to the Innsbruck Armoured Car Regiment channel. Today we'll be covering the actions of the regiment from July the 30th until August the 7th of 1944. Operation Bluecoat, Part 1. So without not much further ado, July the 30th, Operation Bluecoat had begun. The Innsbruck were at 30 minutes notice throughout the day. However, the regiment was not called upon and so spent an enjoyable day resting at the idyllic surrounds of La Tuileries. At last light, the regiment moved out in column to Caumont, where they settled down and harboured for the night in scattered orchards by 0300 hours. July the 31st. The briefing for the day's operations were as follows. All squadrons of the regiment were to slip through the enemy's front line and reconnoitre a box in the area of Le Beni-Bocage, Telchebre-Bocage, Condé-sur-Noire-Roux, Le Menela-Ozof, reporting back on enemy strength and positions. Once the box had been covered, the regiment would then be tasked with capturing bridges over the river Le Noire. For this operation, the Innsbruck were to be detached from the 11th Armoured Division and were to be distributed out to a number of other units. A and D Squadron were assigned to the Guards Armoured Division, while B Squadron, along with all the Blitz troops, were assigned to the 15th Scottish Infantry Division. C Squadron remained with the 11th Armoured Division. The regiment moved out early in the morning and was soon in French Bocage countryside, terrain that was ill-suited to armoured car reconnaissance due to the majority of the minor roads being nothing more than winding cart tracks sandwiched between dense hedgerows atop high banks of earth. This reduced visibility and situational awareness significantly. A Squadron reached the river valley south of Bois de Homme. A couple of patrols crossed the river in the early afternoon but had to retire at great haste in order to avoid being cut off by the enemy infantry. The whole situation was very confused, and little progress was made, although not without its excitement. August the 1st. A and D Squadron spent an inconclusive day awaiting behind the Guards Armoured Division. They occupied observation posts south of Saint-Martin-des-Bassas, from which they observed the German counter-attack to the southeast on the British left flank. The 15th Scottish Infantry Division withstood the German counter-attack, with whom B Squadron were attached. B Squadron had standing patrols on Hill 309, which later became known as Coldstream Hill. Allied positions were shelled considerably throughout the day by enemy artillery and mortars. Thankfully, no casualties were incurred by the Innsbruck. August the 2nd. The objective for the Innsbruck was still to carry out reconnaissance of the box, and then capture the bridges over the river Le Noire. The regiment moved out at 0300 hours and followed the 2nd Battalion Welsh Guards through Le Tourneau, through Cafelos. At Cafelos, the tanks were held up and 3 of their number were knocked out at the main road junction in the village. D Squadron, which was leading the regiment, were advised by the guards not to push on, and so other routes were reconnoitred but no clear way through was found. With no other clear way through, the Innsbruck were first to try the main road again. A scout car commanded by Lieutenant Henson drove on through Cafelos, but shortly afterwards the scout car was knocked out, severely injuring the crew. The driver, Sergeant W.C. Woodruff, later died of his wounds on the 5th of August, while Lieutenant J.H.G. Henson held out until the 7th of August before succumbing to his injuries. A second scout car, commanded by Lieutenant K, shortly followed the same route and were also knocked out. Lieutenant K was badly wounded, while the driver, Trooper E.W. Shepherd, died of his wounds on the 3rd of August. C Squadron also incurred some casualties when a scout car set off an anti-tank mine, killing its crew consisting of Corporal J.C. Buxey and Trooper J.B. Shaw. Any further attempts of breaking through at Cafelos were halted, and the Innsbruck were held up for the time being. Back at Le Tourneau, Major M.E. Gibb had to take over command of B Squadron, following the loss of Major A.W. Reed, who was killed when a mortar bomb exploded on the back of his scout car. At midday, D Squadron managed to find an undefended crossing over the River Soleil near Crevel. The Welsh Guards pushed on through at this crossing and onto Le Beni-Bocage, linking up with the 11th Armoured Division that had captured this area the previous day. The 11th Armoured Division had been able to advance up to the main road between Viry and Estray, and so the Innsbruck raced on from Le Beni-Bocage to get ahead of the leading tanks of the 11th Armoured Division, much to the annoyance of Major General Roberts, who pointed out the Innsbruck were blocking his routes. Lieutenant J. Howdell from D Squadron managed to get 6 miles behind enemy lines and carry out a reconnaissance of Cheney-Dolly and the outskirts of Vassy, in spite of considerable opposition. Much valuable information of the enemy's depth, defence and strength were gathered before having to fight his way back to Allied lines, thankfully without loss. For this action, Lieutenant J. Howdell was awarded the Military Cross. The squadrons were left to their own devices for the night, as returning to the squadron headquarters wasn't possible. This was due to the amount of echelon traffic from the 11th Armoured Division, so the squadron troops settled down where they ended the day. C Squadron headquarters did attempt a resupply run for their forward troops, with an armoured car commanded by Lieutenant Young escorting a half-track driven by Sergeant Pratt, to provide fuel and provisions. However, they were unable to make contact with their forward elements and ended up in a wood with the Welsh Guards, who informed the new arrivals that they were expecting an enemy armoured counterattack consisting of infantry and Panther tanks. After a further search on foot for a few hours by Lieutenant Young, it was decided that not much more could be done, and that the resupply troop would settle down for the night. Much to the surprise of the men, Lieutenant Young insisted that they settle down in the same woods as the Welsh Guards, who were expecting a German counterattack, rather than withdrawing a little. It appears that Lieutenant Young thought that this night might be his last, and so decided to sleep in style, insisting on erecting his bed and changing into his pyjamas rather than sleeping on the ground sheet in his uniform. He assured his men he was just as capable of commanding in his pyjamas as he was in his battle dress. Over the course of the night, A and D squadrons had to pull back as they discovered themselves to be on an open flank. August the 3rd. All squadrons were withdrawn from the front line back to Le Tourneur. Here the regiment rested, although it had to endure sporadic artillery and mortar fire. August the 4th. The regiment spent the day in the area of Le Tourneur, apart from A Squadron, which was called upon at 13:30 hours by the Guards Armoured Division. This led to a bit of a flap as the squadron was in a state of make do and mend, with the squadron leader, Lieutenant H.C. Sim, enjoying a bath when the call came through. However, A Squadron was ready to move at 1400 hours. The Guards Armoured Division commander wanted A Squadron of the Inns of Court to push forward of his leading troops near Estray and obtain all possible information of the enemy. However, this turned out to be impossible as the enemy was engaged on all fronts and a way through could not be found. But the day did not go to waste as A Squadron went about keeping the division headquarters updated on the situation on the front line. Lieutenant H.C. Sim carried out a patrol, partly on foot, which lasted 7.5 hours. In spite of being sniped, mortared and shelled, he reported back valuable information on the enemy troop movements and artillery positions in the area. For this action, Lieutenant H.C. Sim was awarded the Military Cross. August the 5th. The regiment stayed in reserve, although one patrol from A Squadron were called upon and sent to an observation post north of Monchamp. Here they observed the enemy until smoke and haze reduced visibility, making observation impossible. August the 6th. A provisional plan was conceived for the Inns of Court Regiment combined with the 2nd Household Cavalry Regiment to pass through the American sector to the front line near the area of Domfront. From here they would fan out north from Domfront to the Alencon Road towards Argentan and Condé-sur-Noyer. The objective of this plan was to disrupt and destroy enemy supply convoys, particularly fuel and ammunition, with the aim being to reduce enemy resistance around Viry, Estray, Vassy and Condé-sur-Noyer. However, it came to light that the Americans were planning on clearing the area themselves with 2 corps, and the operation for the Inns of Court and the 2nd Household Cavalry was scrubbed. August the 7th. The regiment was still resting at La Tourneur, although it was kept on alert by repeated reports of scattered enemy resistance and roaming Tiger tanks. Losses over these days were 6 killed, 1 injured and 3 Dingo scout cars knocked out. Operation Bluecoat came to an end. Reflecting on the operation, the Inns of Court will recall the dust, dead cattle, extreme exhaustion and little to show for the number of casualties they suffered. References are on screen, and I hope you can join me on August the 10th in the next video in this series, the Inns of Court War Diary.